Hello and welcome to another very special Monday edition of Trends in the Housing Market. I am Mike Martins, broadcasting out of Vancouver, BC. I'm running a little late today. Had some errands to run Monday morning. So let's start with Trends in the Housing Market. Today is the 14th of November 2016, and the year is almost over. It's done. Can you believe that? It's December in a few weeks. It's over. So let's get to the trends in the housing market. I got a really cool one here, printed kind of funky, so I'm going to try my best to read this one. Hong Kong housing. This is a really good one. Use shipping containers for temporary housing for Hong Kong social welfare group. This is a pretty. It's dire straits there right now in Hong Kong, especially with the limited space within the little province region they're in. Dutch companies offering an estimated to Hong Kong $190,000 Hong Kong dollars per unit, hailed as described as an interim solution for those waiting years for public flats. This is a pretty good one. This is a pretty good answer to it, to the housing, low-income housing. A lending non-governmental organization is mulling a test to run converted shipping containers as temporary homes for people waiting in lengthening queues for public flats in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Council, Social Service and Federation representation at least 400 NGOs in the city's social welfare sector suggested that the temporary housing out of ready-made modernized shipping containers in abandoned car parks and under flyovers. That's fantastic. You could fill up a lot of spaces with that. It goes on to say that the containers, each measuring about 200 square feet, are insulated and equipped with their own bathroom, open kitchen, and air conditioning unit in the windows. So this is a really good idea for the severely low income and the poor, working poor, that are obviously living on the streets or forced to living in poverty. The council considering ordering one of the next few months from Tempelsing, a Dutch company that has built thousands of container homes in Amsterdam and abroad. The concept originated from there, where the container units have provided temporary housing for students and more than a decade. So this is a very innovative and a really good way to house a lot of the people. But I'm going to have to use my fart machine on this. And one more for good luck. Okay, why? There's ghost cities in China, people. There's more abandoned ghost cities with nobody living in them, with like one tenant and 3,000 units. Why can't these people have housing? What's the problem? Why? And I'm really against that. There's massive abandoned cities in China, ghost cities littered all over the place. Mind you, they're not in Hong Kong, but also people could relocate for a better lifestyle if there is housing available outside of Hong Kong. That's the only little flaw. If you live in Hong Kong and you're a Hong Kong citizen, I think it's different. It's like Macauanese. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about that. Bad news for my friends in Australia. Australian housing investors are back. They're back. By David Scott. It says here, after regulated imposed slowdown earlier this year, it's clear that the housing investors are returning to Australia's property market. According to the housing finance figures released by the ABS on Saturday, the value of off-loans extended to housing investors surged by 4.6 to 12.41 billion in September, seasonally adjusting tensions. I think this says tensions there. The print is really bad here. It was the sixth month in eighth that the value of the investor lending increased. Not only that, it was the largest monthly total in dollar terms since August 1st of last year. Compared to the levels of the year earlier, the dollar value of lending rose 9.5%, the first year-on-year increasing since July last year. So people, I think I know where these, so Australian housing investors are back. Where are they coming from? I think they're coming from Vancouver. Don't get mad, guys. I live in Vancouver, but I'm thinking they're coming from Vancouver ever since they imposed that 15% tax, and now they're imposing a $10,000. Look at my last video in Not Trends in the Housing Market, Vancouver housing crisis. Look at my last video I posted about $10,000 fine daily if you lie about your house being empty. Watch that video. I'll leave a link below to that video so you guys can watch it. Australia housing investors are back. I think it's people from Vancouver because they're now in Toronto and their investors are in Toronto and they're speculating once again back in Australia. Now, a little good news for my friends down in Australia, and I'll say this because this looks good and this could affect a lot of other countries, so pay attention, okay? Is Donald Trump going to burst Australia's housing bubble? Oh my God, people waiting in Australia to buy for almost a decade. The caveat has to go up front. Given his prosperity, for lying, exaggerating, generally raving, nobody can know what Donald Trump will actually do as president. He probably doesn't know himself, but according to the bond reaction, he will burst Australia's East Coast housing bubble and causing interest rates to rise. Trump to burst Oz bubble. The rise President Trump could spell the end of an Australian East Coast housing bubble. That would be the relatively nice way to prick the bubble. The more common fear is that he could start a trade war with China, would cause a global recession, one we wouldn't escape. That definitely would be a nice way to achieve a lower housing prices. So let's hope that there is enough sanity left in Congress to prevent such madness and just consider the more being interest rate story. The Bloomberg poll of 27 local economists ahead of the Reserve Bank board meeting of Melbourne Cup Day found a majority of the forecasting another RBA, Royal Bank of Australia, rate cut or two by the middle of next year. Nobody was forecasting a rate rise. With the advent of Trumpistism, I can't even read that. There's a possibility Trump will an inflate driver that would start changing economists' forecasts. It certainly makes them less certain. More inflation is that the bond market would react, is saying as yields rise and the price of bonds dive. Typically, of the line was part of the initial thinking of AMP chief economist Shane Oliver. Some of Trump's economic policies could provide a boost to the U.S. economy. The Reagan-esque combination of big tax cuts and increasing defense and infrastructure spending will provide an initial fiscal stimulus. At the reduced regulation, a bit of supply boost to the economy. The downside, though, is that this will blow out the budget deficit at the risk that the protectionist policies will set off a trade war, and along with much higher consumer prices and immigration cutbacks will boost costs, all of which could ultimately mean higher inflation for bond yields and faster path of the Fed rate hikes in the U.S. So this Donald Trump could affect the Australian and maybe other housing markets like London, Canada, New Zealand. Let's go to New Zealand now. I got some friends in New Zealand, okay? New Zealand tenants living in fear that evicted tenant could return. David Craig of Auckland's Mount Ruskill says that the new tenant at the pensioner village of Taylor Court was defected outside and assaulted him. Terrorized, housing New Zealand tenants fear an evicted tenant could return. Matters come to head on Friday when a man defected on a neighbor's doorstep, allegedly punched another one in the eye, threatened the other residents at the Ruskill Housing Group say. Since the middle-aged man moved in there 3 months ago, they say that he suffered abuse from him and have struggled to get help from authorities, including Housing New Zealand, police, health services, and residents, Sanju Krisha said. Taylor Court residents Avedala Narayan left the Sanju Christian outside of the neighboring tenant's smashed up flat. Krishna said that he suffers threats from tenants daily. Wow. The opinion housing in New Zealand keen for a new national standard in meth contamination. New housing for New Zealand receives 26,587 complaints. So they're having some sort of a meth drug problem in New Zealand, and it's getting tenants to kick out. It's getting landlords to kick tenants out, and it's becoming an all-out problem. If you're from New Zealand, please comment below and let us know what's going there. See what else it says here. Krishna, 66, said his neighbor who suffers from mental health and drug issues needed special attention, care. Residents shouldn't have endured this kind of violence toward him. I asked, why do you remove him from here and put him in a place where he can't be cared for? On Saturday, the man's glass and rubbish strewn, partially boarded up flat, lay deserted, and living room chair wedged in a smashed living room floor window. The glass shards surrounded the man's duplex unit. Wow, that's horrible. Following the Friday incident, next-door neighbor David Craig at 64 told Number One News that the tenant left him only with a black eye. I was chatting away on the next minute, and he just straight came to my eye for no reason whatsoever, told Number One News. An Auckland police spokesperson said that he has been liaising with housing in New Zealand and consultant. An eviction notice was served on the man. So the guy's probably getting evicted. And there's a lot of housing problems down in New Zealand. And I know there's a huge meth problem down there too. So if you're from New Zealand, please comment below and share in, or maybe leave us some links. I'm having a really hard time finding good links from New Zealand. Whew. London, let's go to England. London's housing slowing holds back UK property price gains. London's priciest neighborhoods are weighing down on house prices growth in the UK, according to Acdada and ILSL Property Services Place. The average value of a British home rose 3% in the year of October. The group said that in the report publishing on Saturday, excluding London and the South East, average prices rose 3.6%. From a month earlier, the national prices gained 0.4% in October and £294,351, which is $366,000 large. London's property market has been the hardest hit by the UK's decision to leave the European Union and the imposition of stamp duty surcharge or investment properties in April. So they added this surcharge for investment properties in April. Price growth is at its lowest since February 2012. While another report on Thursday highlighted that the home values in the capital had fallen for 8 consecutive months, prices outside of London have continued to rise, however. So the suburbs. So it's going to be like Vancouver. They put this 15% tax down on foreign investors, then they add this other tax for empty homes, and they add this and they add that. But in the suburbs, everything seems to be going up, and they're now speculating in the suburbs. So places like Burnaby, New Westminster, Surrey, all the way out to Hope is being speculated. And I heard Kelowna is being bought up right now, and the island. So Vancouver Island. So if you go to Vancouver Island, you'll notice that problem there, that it's being bought up and a lot of empty homes. So we'll see what happens. And this looks like London is coinciding towards a housing crash because they're going 8 consecutive months of decrease in property values. Let's keep going here. Analysts divide on state and Canadian housing bubble. Woof. Woof. This is for Mortgage Broker News. While the rate of home construction throughout the country has noticeably declined over the past few months, much controversy remains among the analysts as to whether the slowdown is just a temporary speed bump or an indicator that the Canadian housing bubble has burst long at last. Yes, that's what it is. When the buildings stop being built, there's no more money in it, or it's impossible to buy. Figures from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation showed that the annual price of a construction dropped from 219,363 units in September to 192,928 in October. Urban multi-unit projects like condominiums suffered the greatest decrease of 15%, At the time, in that time frame, the Motley Fool Canada reported. Bank of Montreal economist Robert Kavik allayed for years of the housing crisis. However, starting that these numbers represent a normalization rather than a crash. So, October's tally brings activity back down to ever stable and fundamentally supported rage seen between 2010 and the mid 2015 before the activity broke out to the upside. Kavik wrote that an investor note, "We'll see if this level of activity, particularly in Vancouver, where starts to fall the lowest since 2011, holds in the 3 months ahead in response to softening the demand conditions." So it looks like because the decrease in new construction is going, I'm seeing a lot of houses, 5-6 houses for sale for combined construction, and they're just for sale. No one's buying them. There's a lot of like group houses, like 5-6 homes right beside each other, where they want to build a condo or some sort of strata crap, and it's not working, and it's still for sale. I'm looking at properties now that have been for sale since the new laws came into place. But God forbid, if I go film something, they want to sue my face off. So let's continue. Rethinking tent cities as help in housing crisis, not a nuisance. Now listen to this. This is a really good one. Activists say BC should follow Portland, Seattle in allowing shelter under polycotton. So they're talking about tents, like a tent city. The proliferation of homeless encampments in the direct result of housing crisis. They're the developed country equivalent to a shantytown in the infill of vacant lots on spare ground with collections of tents sheltering people with nowhere else to go. And the unit recently, indeed, often still, they are viewed as a nuisance and the civic landscape, especially in places that bank their beautiful visual appeal. Officialdum's usual response has been to try to clean up tent encampments, using police to move their tents along, or worse. But attitudes of encampments are changing. In Portland and Seattle, authorities are conceding that for some, no better options exist. Vancouver and Victoria are two eyeing the possibilities of opening up a new and more positive relationship with campers, previously regarding as unwanted vagrants. After Seattle declared a state of housing emergency last year, city's authorities operating for the last days a week with 2 operations per day conducted as many as 600 sweeps of homeless camps. Officials say that they will not be force people to fold their tents and move, but at times they seized and destroyed their belongings. That's sad. The stories are really devastating, said Yuri Radersky, an attorney who advocates for the homeless in Seattle with Columbia Legal Services. We've heard of people who have lost very sentimental items, such as only the photograph of the biological family, people left out in the cold in the Seattle winter without a tent and sleeping bag, shivering under a blanket and getting pneumonia. It's really, really detrimental. Tactics used to drive out campers, sometimes but extreme. Abbotsford, BC, used its bylaw powers to try and evict homeless people. When that didn't get rid of them, the city resorted to spreading chicken manure on their camps, pepper spraying, and destroying and trashing tents and personal property. That hurts, man. That's pretty harsh, man. Pretty harsh. The harassment led campers to enlist from the Pivot Legal Society, which took their case to the BC Supreme Court. It ruled that when Abbotsford prohibited outdoor sheltering, it breached the campers' rights and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So this is pretty harsh, especially for people that are just trying to get an address, just trying to get, the biggest country. Canada is one of the biggest countries in the world, and when you don't have a place for people to live or even a community center to house people until they have a proper fixed address so they can move on with their lives and get a job. No one's going to hire somebody without a fixed address. So it hurts. It hurts to see how people are having to, You know, a lot of people, none of these people, when they were in their younger years with their parents or going to high school and stuff, they always expect that, they never always say, or they always imagine that something like this will never happen to them, and it has happened. So we should take into consideration that these people have souls and their lives just like us. Anyways, let's go into something more exciting, something less depressing, actually. New house pricing rise on strength. That's what it's written like that. New housing prices rise on strength in Toronto. Canadian new housing prices rose 0.2% in September from August 18th, consecutively increased on continued strength of the major markets of Toronto, Statistics Canada said on Thursday. The advance matched the forecast of analysis in Redder's poll. Prices in combined Toronto-Oshawa region, which accounts for 27.92% of the Canadian market, climbed 0.3%. Vancouver prices increased by the same amount in both cities. Builders cited market conditions as one of the reasons for the gain. So, because they're building less houses, there's probably less availability to buy. This is the first article I read, and that could trickle down to this. Possibly. The federal government, concerned by what it says signs to markets are overheating last month, and it was tightened the mortgage rules to close loophole and home sales. The new housing price index excludes apartments and condominiums, which the government says are particularly the cause of concern, which accounts for 1/3 of the new housing. So this is from Thursday, November 10, 2016. So from a few days ago. So this poll looks like it's within thing. And the reason why I printed this poll and why I want to discuss this is because it says here, the average house price in Canada for September 2016, this is right across the board. So they're taking every house in existence in Canada and then dividing it by its worth. The average house in Canada is $587 and $461. $587,000, $461. These are the housing prices trending. These are the trending housing prices across the board. Wow. So it's pretty much past $500,000 to own a house nowadays. So gotta get your employers to start paying more money, guys. Let's see what I got here. Teslas in the trailer park. A California city faces its housing squeeze. California's in a lot of problems too, guys. Mountain View, California. If there is anything that just about every California agrees with, it is that the cost is too much to live in the state. Over the last few years, the price of buying a home or renting an apartment became so burdensome that that it pervades almost every issue, from the state's elevated property rate to the debate and multi-million-dollar teardowns and lines of recreational vehicles parked in Silicon Valley side streets. What do you think is happening? Same thing that's happening all over the world. The town of Mountain View, Google's home, wants to do something about that, given the new marching orders from the reform-minded city council that was swept into the office here 2 years ago. Mountain View is looking to increase its housing stock by as much 50%, including as many as 10,000 units in the area around the Google's main campus. We need to provide housing because there's a housing shortage, said Lenny Segal, a Mountain View councilman. That may seem an obvious tautology, but it turns out that the highly contagious in the state where most cities and suburbs are still dominated by anti-growth politics and seek to maximize the construction of tax-generating offices while minimizing the number of budget-depleting residents. California's in trouble, guys. I have a lot of friends that left California that went out of state. They couldn't handle it anymore. Couldn't handle it. The price of housing was going up anywhere from 6 to 12% every quarter. There was one guy, he had an increase of 100%. He took it to the lawyer. The lawyer couldn't do nothing for him. It's like, I mean, if they're going to increase your rent by 100%, there's nothing we could do. His rent went from $1,400 US for a one bedroom, and they were trying to charge him $2,300. And he had to walk away from the place, and he had to pack up and leave. And there was nothing he could do about it. And there's no some sort of rental protection act. I'm not sure. I don't know why. So let's go to Comox Valley. This is Vancouver Island. This is very important, okay? Because I've been telling you guys in my last few shows that there's a lot of investors being bussed in to the Sunshine Coast. There's a lot of investors being bussed in to Kelowna. There's people being bussed into Kamloops. There's investors being bussed into, what's the other city there? There's a lot of cities that a lot of investors are being bussed into where they could go and snatch up properties. This is by Megan Thomas, CBC News. She posted on November 12, 2016. Outreach workers in the Comox Valley on the Vancouver Island say an affordable housing shortage is turning into a crisis situation. The plea for more affordable and supportive houses come a year after voters in the region agreed to a new property tax to help solutions for homeless people at the risk of becoming homeless. The new levy showed the issue is a priority, but the roughly $200,000 per year it raises isn't enough to make sufficient differences on its own, said Grant Schilling with Dawn to Dawn Action, Homelessness Society. It reflects the attitude of people of the Comox Valley. They want to see homelessness solved here, he said. Low vacancy, rising rent. Dawn to Dawn provides that the rental supplements to help keep people from falling into homelessness, but a low vacancy rate and the hot real estate market in Comox Valley are driving up the rates, Schilling said. I have a good relationship with the property management and companies here. They can no longer find any units for me, he said. Rental units are now being sold, and there are no longer rental units. The shortage of affordable housing is something Statien Humasi also deals with, the support worker at the Comox Valley Transition Society. Transition Society. Sorry, I can't read. With helps from women and children who are escaping violence. The tight rental market makes it difficult for people to move on from society's transition from house, Husami said. I'm getting an increased number of calls where people are just terrified to leave because they don't want to end up on the street, she said. This is horrible. And on a really sad note, don't want to mention any names, don't even want to say. There's one school teacher that has to stay back 40 minutes to 2 hours almost on a daily basis because 4 to 6 of her students need a shelter to sleep in. High school. And they don't have a shelter, so she has to be on the phone pretty much after school for hours trying to find shelters for these kids on a daily basis. That's how bad it's really getting out here, guys. So, Brampton Guardian. Peel, this is Brampton, Ontario. Peel families wait nearly 8 years for affordable housing. Recently released figures that the first half of this year were almost 12,600 individuals and families on Peel's wait list for affordable housing and just a few hundred placed in homes. The overview of the region's centralized wait list revealed that in July 2016 there were 12,508 individuals and families registered in the search for affordability houses. Between January and July, 3,234 new applicants for housing submitted. Just 340 individual families were placed in housing. This is not good, people. The growing population, high poverty and unemployment numbers, low vacancy rates, and very little creation of new rental stock are the factor of made reduction and the wait list difficult, according to some report, represents the Peel Human Services Commissioner Jani Shi. The reported average wait time for a housing application on the list is more than 3 years and a half. This is horrible, people. This is what I'm talking about. Is housing's become a powerful commodity. I mean, why don't people just invest in? I know the stock market's pretty risky to invest in. I've invested. If you look at some of my videos in the Canopy Growth and Aurora, the new marijuana companies, I invested a few months back, and I'm blowing up. Income-wise, like with those smart investments, right? And people study the markets. They could get out of the housing because housing, I could see people seeing as the housing market so much easier to do because especially when you have a lot of money, you could just snatch up 4 or 5 homes and sit on them and expect for them to go up. where in the markets, if you study some of the markets, some of the trends in the markets and futures markets and gold and commodity markets, I have no education, and I'm really good at this whole stock thing. I could walk in there with 2 large and walk out with 10 large in a few months doing proper trades and research. And that's what's happening. I think what's happening is people want the easy way to make money. Instead of investigating companies, investigating dividends, investigating ETFs, investigating what's going on in the markets, investigating what's going on with overseas markets, with banking, with interest rates. People don't want to study that and get to understand that, because once you do start studying and understanding that, you can start placing your money in specific medium to low risk markets, instead of parking it in homes and leaving them empty. And then this causes a bigger worldwide panic for everybody. Anyways, that's probably why the markets are kind of bouncy right now, is because a lot of people are just putting their money in homes. And I think that's just like 2008. Remember what happened in the United States? They're still recovering from that. Chicago still hasn't recovered from 2008. And a majority of the west and east side of Chicago, most of the people are still underwater. They still owe more for their houses than what they were purchased for. Anyways, guys, I want to leave that. I'm going to leave a link below to my last video because it's a hot story. I really wanted to get it out there. It's the one where Vancouver is really pulling up their socks. The mayor is really doing it for the province. He's really going out there and doing this for his people, protecting his people, protecting Canadians' rights, and basically adding a $10,000 a year tariff or tax on empty homes, and if you lie about it, it's $10,000 a day. I'll leave a link below for that. Thanks for watching Trends in the Housing Market. I'm Mike Martins. Big hug to everyone, and thanks for watching. Goodbye.